Boa tarde a todos, que alegria estar aqui mais uma vez na Rio2C. Obrigada pelo espaço, obrigada pelo convite, Fabi. Eu sou a Talita Cordeiro, sou diretora-geral da ABMI, Associação Brasileira da Música Independente. É uma instituição que cria sustentação para que empresas brasileiras do mercado fonográfico consigam ter acesso e direitos iguais dentro do mercado mundial. Assim como existe a ABMI no Brasil, existem associações de diversos países que fazem esse trabalho em seus territórios. E hoje nós estamos aqui com a presença do Tony Kiewel, da Sub Pop. Ele também é representante da E2IM, dos Estados Unidos. Nós estamos com o Meyer, da Random Sounds. Ele também é representante da ABMI, que é a Associação do Paraguai. E para representar aqui o mercado brasileiro, estamos com o Rafael Farah, da Balaclava Records. Vamos fazer uma primeira... Primeiro, agradecimento aos três pela presença e pelo tempo. Para a gente ganhar tempo aqui, né? Nosso tempo muito curtinho para falar bastante. Eu gostaria de perguntar a eles quais as oportunidades que eles enxergam para o mercado independente atual. Começando pelo Mark, com a sua visão da América Latina.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm going to speak in English. Well, my Portuguese is not the best, so I have to stick to one language. I think that it's really clear that innovation always comes from the independent sector of the music industry, and majors usually tend to buy what's already working and what's already established. So I think that every now and then we have these transition periods where majors go shopping and buy almost every company that they can. And I think that we're living through that exactly right now. If you've been following the news, you probably read and heard about this. So I think that's a great opportunity for new companies to grow and continue innovating in that landscape of the market. And I think that's the greatest opportunity that we have right now.
Rafael Farah.
Eu devo concordar com o Marcos, acho que é isso. No mercado independente, a gente precisa sempre estar muito conectado também com as inovações tecnológicas e seguir com esse foco desse movimento das majors mesmo de comprar as independentes, né? Ou investir nas independentes. Então, esse é um caminho, sim, concordo.
Tony?
I think everything they said is true. I think what I'm more interested in and where I think the independent community can make the most is in new and undiscovered or growing musical scenes. I think it's almost a subject of size and scale. You know, major labels have to focus on things that are already obvious or super popular. And I think where the independent sector can have the most influence on culture and have the most success financially is by taking the risks that they are in a position to take as smaller companies. And it's these companies with one or two or a half dozen employees that can actually make money on something, an artist with a smaller audience. And I think that's also incredibly important to any community and culture, you know, and I think we have a responsibility to that degree.
Bom, obrigada pela primeira rodada de respostas. A gente entende que o mercado independente ele é responsável por garantir a diversidade e a inovação no mercado, em tempos em que muitas pessoas têm acesso a plataformas e a soluções, e tem muitas pessoas entrantes nesse mercado, às vezes que não são, né, especificamente do setor da música. Então, vamos nos aprofundar aqui um pouco mais, né? Tony, a Sub Pop foi pioneira em transformar uma cena de nicho em uma revolução cultural. Como os selos e os artistas independentes podem trabalhar hoje, né? O que você acha que tem de novo? Sub Pop was a pioneer in turning a niche scene in a Sub Pop. Em português? Pode inglês? Vamos lá. Vou repetir. Agora sim?
I would say yes. I mean, sub pop. This is a part of what I believe about the independent sector is because that's what sub pop did, and it worked. So that's now part of my belief system, right? But you know, I think it's the same today. In some ways, it's easier today, right? A lot of things are harder. Everybody is releasing music, AI is releasing music, so to cut through all of that is so much harder than it was before. But back then, you couldn't even get music into people's ears or hands, right? There was both of those problems of how do you find an audience, and also once you find them, how do you convince a record store to take the record so that it can be purchased, right, and complete the circle. And now, you know, access is everywhere for everyone, right? And back then, one of the things that worked really well for Sub Pop was, you know, we sold records through the mail, right? And we would make mail order catalogs, that were almost magazines that would describe each record, and we would be very over the top, you know, really exaggerate everything was part of our gimmick, you know, and silly and funny, and global conquering was part of our shtick. But you know, I still think about that a lot now today, because it is still about, and it, for different reasons, it's still about direct connection to your customer, right? And audience. And we see this a lot now with people complaining about social networks and social networks closing off your access, right? After you built your followers, and then you're not allowed to talk to them. And now everybody's switching back to email, right, as something that you control, right, and how important that is, or text messaging systems. And that's really fascinating to me, that things can, you know, come back around for different reasons, and they're still important for new reasons, maybe more important than ever. So I believe in direct connection is kind of one of the key things that we, both artists and independent companies, should be thinking about. How do you achieve that?
Rafael, vocês fazem isso muito bem aqui no Brasil, né? Como a Balaclava, como um selo que trabalha com nicho específico, trabalha na construção de público.
Bom, a Balaclava, desde o início, a gente construiu a marca muito com essa frente de ter uma conexão direta com o público final, né? Então, a gente fez isso de diversas maneiras, com várias frentes. Então, a gente começou como um selo musical, lançando artistas de uma cena específica, mas que tinha um recorte, uma identidade forte. E a gente começou lá atrás produzindo festas e shows e pequenos festivais que conectavam essa cena, traziam as pessoas junto e traziam essa cara do que a gente queria comunicar e representar, né? Como selo, como cena. E acho que isso aos poucos foi construindo, né? No caso, uma cena. Então, com as bandas se estruturando, a gente conseguindo montar um time legal com profissionais de qualidade, assessoria de imprensa, distribuição, rádio, TV, enfim. E um tempo a gente foi aumentando essas frentes todas, profissionalizando, e acredito que esse é um papel muito importante do selo independente, dentro desses nichos e dessas cenas, né? De fato, estruturar uma cena musical que eu acho que é uma coisa muito difícil, muito valiosa, assim, para um movimento cultural, para uma inovação no mercado da música, enfim, isso, de fato, como o Tony até comentou, acho que vem muito de baixo, vem da base, né? E a gente forma essa base, nós, os artistas, eu digo, né? Não a Balaclava, mas a toda a cena, quando ela anda junto. E eu acho que é isso, assim, a gente sempre tem muito essa frente mesmo, de ter uma conexão com o público, construir essa comunidade, que eu acho que hoje em dia é uma coisa que a gente foca e prioriza muito, sabe? Manter as pessoas próximas, tendo a marca como um selo de uma chancela de confiança, de curadoria, sabe? Das pessoas poderem saber que quando a Sub Pop vai lançar um artista, a Balaclava vai lançar um artista, a Merge Records vai lançar um artista, aquilo tem uma cara, e as pessoas podem confiar, e eu acho que essa conexão com o público, ela é um ouro, assim, é uma coisa muito importante dentro do mercado.
Mark, como a análise de dados pode fortalecer essas iniciativas, né, na construção da música como um ativo e de base de fãs e de consumo?
Okay, so I think using analytics to create marketing campaigns is something that people tend to overlook at the beginning of their careers. And I think that we sometimes think that working harder is what we have to do. And sometimes we maybe have to work less hard, but smarter. And we can use the analytics that all these platforms that we sometimes love, that we sometimes hate, gives us to create smarter ways to work. And on a particular way of working that I saw working really good in Latin America and other markets that I've been working with is not only collaborating with another scene by traveling, but also like creating new threads between associated labels or artists that can exchange their audiences, and doing that before doing a tour, for example. So you can, see who the producers are in a certain city that you already have a little fan base, or some artists that you could exchange some audience with. And I think that's one of the few things that you can do with the analytics that these tools provide. Also, maybe not as important as quantity, but trying to focus on quality, as for example, having the direct contact information of your most loyal fans. Sometimes DSPs don't show you that information, so you have to get it on your own. And they control they are the middlemen, and they control everything. So you have to make sure to own the email addresses, the phone numbers, the WhatsApp groups, of your most loyal fans. And that's hard to quantify in like a monthly listeners number, but it's the most important number that you can have is, I don't know, 200 phone numbers of people that will share your music on the release date. I think that's a great metric to focus on, and maybe continue growing with from there.
Nos últimos anos, nós vimos muito crescer o poder da colaboração e dos feats, né? O que o Mark falou sobre quando o artista quer expandir o seu público, é muito interessante para ele fazer conexão com novos territórios e trabalhar com quem já está trabalhando dentro daquele território, né? Então, gostaria de perguntar aqui sobre a parte artística. Aproveitando a presença do Tony, o que você procura em novos territórios, né? O que te atrai para fechar novos contratos ou para trazer novos artistas para o seu?
Well, I think for when it comes to new artists, we're always just, it's never the same thing. If it is one thing, it's that they are just doing something that feels very honest and real, and is pushing the boundaries of what we maybe expect from whatever genre they might be, you know, part of, right? We're not interested in any one particular scene of music. I think we have certain genres we're better at marketing than others, but we've tried over certainly the last 10 years or so to really push what we can do, and I found that is not only more fun for us, but also that you pick up things from working in other genres. There are things that are standard practice. The collaboration stuff, even that Mark is talking about, it really is. I mean, maybe it's obvious, but I can't spend money and make what happens when a collaboration between two artists is put on Spotify, right? You are automatically reaching two artists' worth of audience when you do a collaborative track like that, and you really can't pay for that to happen, right? And it's really interesting. It used to be you would maybe hope that you could grow your audience by opening for a bigger artist, right? And you would try really hard to get that opening slot on a tour and grow your audience that way. And it arguably barely ever worked in my experience. But this with Spotify, it's crazy how much it can impact and permanently impact your reach after one track release. And I also like what Mark said about the quality over quantity, because I think that's something that I feel like in the past few years, people have started thinking that if I need to keep putting singles up on Spotify in order to keep engaged. And there's a little truth to that, but the reality is, like, you can damage the way your algorithm by putting up stuff that's I've started reserving some stuff for specific services like Bandcamp if I think it's maybe too far out and might actually negatively get that stips, right? And also Spotify's not even going to pay you if you don't hit a certain threshold, so why give them everything anyway? So anyway, that's a little off subject, but I think it's really like some, I think, good stuff to know. But as far as like new territories, that is one of the good things. We've always looked internationally, but it is so much easier to discover music in other countries now than it ever was before. And that's, what's fascinating to me is, despite that, what we've seen in the last few years is most countries are focusing on their own artists, which I think is great, because I think it's so important to grow your own culture and grow your own communities and art communities, and ideally influence the world with your culture, but it's odd that I've wondered a lot. Mark and I are an organization, we talk all the time about these weird trends in how, they call it the globalization that is occurring on streaming platforms is fascinating. But is it a really extra good reason for why collaborations are so important, especially ones between different countries? Because your stuff is getting blocked in to where you are from, they deny it, but it's for sure happening, right? Yeah. By they, I mean streaming platforms. Yeah. I went all over the place. I'm sorry.
Bom, então, considerando isso, né? Quando você constrói a sua base de fãs e já sabe exatamente onde você vai trabalhar, fica muito mais fácil de fazer parcerias e de ter um bom planejamento para isso, né? Mas às vezes acontecem coisas que não são planejadas e que nos surpreendem muito nesse mercado. Tem algo que vocês presenciaram que foi muito disruptivo ultimamente? Alguma estratégia ou algo que vocês não esperavam que fosse acontecer, mas que de repente se tornou algum caso?
I think that Tony has a couple of tracks that went really viral thanks to sync. Maybe he can share some of them.
I feel like I'm hogging that. We did, there's a TV show, Heated Rivalry, that got very popular over the last few months, and we did have a band with I mean, the show creator was a fan of this band and took a 20-year-old song and wrote the series around the song. So lyrics were in several episodes leading up to, it was a dream scenario, right? But nobody knew this was coming. He wasn't an established show creator. It was a Canadian production. It wasn't, wasn't a big American production. It was a smaller Canadian production that got picked up by a lot of networks around the world and became a phenomenon. And we did see overnight, there's the stream of a 20-year-old song went from, 2,000 streams a day to 500,000 streams a day. One overnight, right? And this is a band that is, they had a fan base, but they were not living off of their record sales, right? It's life-changing, I think, for them. It was a perfect scenario, and that is true. Like sync revenue is great because a good use comes with automatically a lot of money, but it is the way that those uses, so I'll say the use itself was big. It was fans of the show using that song in all of their TikTok posts about the show, right? It magnifies it by 100 times. So it's incredible. And it creates a deep relationship between the show's fan base and the song that, we're still, it's been, I think 8 months. It's still the same streams every day. Even though the show's been over for, since January. It is fascinating. But the things that have changed and the things that have changed things for the worse is AI. And not all AI, I'm not, it's almost boring to talk about how AI is a bummer, but it is really, really becoming difficult to navigate because we've worked with hundreds of artists over the 40 years that we've been a record company. And many of those artists from, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, maybe haven't released anything since we're the last record company that they worked with. I take it very seriously, our responsibility to, take care of their catalog. And they don't even know or see what's happening. But every day there's like AI songs getting put up with their band names. I think they're getting targeted, right? Because they're relatively inactive. I think whoever is doing it, I don't know who's doing it, but they get uploaded through DistroKid and CD maybe. And it's, and they're just constant barrage every day, songs showing up with AI art covers, bad generic sounding electronic songs. But don't sound anything like the band at all. And I have to go and take those down, and just finding them is hard. It's not easy to actually see them all happening. And then, it's really a pain in the ass. And we see it as our responsibility to take care of those profile pages and keep it clean, because it messes up their skip rates. It messes everything up for their catalog. And I hate that. And it's eating up so much time and energy. I mean, I did the math the other day. It was like, I think our company is spending close to like 10 hours a week time just trying to erase those tracks every week. And I hate that.
Mark, como é para você lidar com esse cenário de inteligência artificial, né? Sendo uma plataforma de distribuição?
It's a harder and tougher job than I expected. And it's funny because we even had to join an organization to fight fraud. And there's people like from the FBI and stuff. And I couldn't imagine myself working in the music industry, having to collaborate with the Department of Justice and the FBI. But, you know, these online music platforms created a perfect scenario for people trying to get rich quick schemes. And, you know, we've seen this happening with almost every technological advance in the last few years. And music sadly was not the exception. And, you know, generative AI sadly made it much, much worse. Tony's example was just one of the few things that people can do to mess up your profiles or your masters or your publishing, and, you know, try to get some bucks through generative AI, or, you know, just straight up stealing people's work. And yeah, it's a little sad to talk about it. I can get very angry just thinking about it.
Então, nesse contexto, né, considerando o impacto da inteligência artificial no mercado, juntamente com modelos de pagamento, né, que não são muito justos com os artistas independentes, vocês enxergam alguma alternativa para isso? Ou talvez uma valorização das venues, dos shows, do mercado físico de produtos novamente? Tony, vocês têm estratégias para essas alternativas?
Wow, that is a tough one. This streaming, I mean, when we have a heated rivalry, Wolfbreed, the money works in streaming. But, you know, the tougher thing, you know, the main alternative way for us as record labels is physical products and selling LPs and CDs. And that's even harder to do with a new developing artist, right? So sadly, you know, because as this is, again, maybe obvious, it is for sure obvious that the people don't listen to CDs and LPs in the way that they used to. They buy them, and every year we see new headlines that buy more records than ever. But the people buying records is very different from the people buying records in the 90s, where you heard a song on the radio, you like the song, you're curious to hear the whole record, you buy the record, right? Nobody does that, you know, unless you need to love a band, right? You've already fallen in love. You want it's an object, right? To prove your fandom to the band and connection. But new bands don't have that. And so it's harder than ever for a new band to sell a physical thing, except at a show. And that's really interesting because I think people, they engage more emotionally when you see a band live. They have an excuse to talk to the band at the merch table. If you are in a band, you should for sure go to your merch table. Seems obvious, but you'd be surprised how many people don't. Because that's what people are paying for, is engagement, I think. But yes, we make t-shirts now. We try to sell those, but it has really been hard. Over the last couple of years, we've thought a lot about this struggle, and we've been shrinking the number of records that like the quantity when we are working with a brand new artist. And the reality of a lot of the conversations that we have as independent record companies is about how much harder it is for new bands today, and how we're all struggling to, we fortunately, many of us have a handful of larger artists, and you have maybe like the heated rivalry thing where suddenly you break through and then everything works great, but it's really, really hard for the new bands. And I'm not sure how to fix that, honestly. There is no extra money, it's maybe sync is the wild card, or everybody, wants a TikTok hit, but you can't now more than ever, the bands building their own audiences on TikTok and Instagram, that's worth less and less every year, because Instagram and TikTok aren't interested in you controlling your audience, right? They are actively disrupting that every time they mess with the algorithm. It is all about, not your followers anymore, just what they randomly decide, or the algorithm randomly decides should get to see your thing, which means you have no control over anything. As soon as you figure out a little thing, they will make it go away. So you're really just left with, the old tools that you had before, and which is why, again, we come back to like the collaboration tracks is so important. And I want to encourage everybody needs to be, I don't know if it was as big of a headline down here, but the Geese, the whole, Geese is a big New York band or new indie band, and the is a psyop, because some, the digital marketing company at South by Southwest took credit for, their efforts making the band huge, which of course, this digital marketing company is going to take all the credit, if given the opportunity. They're trying to get people to hire them. Geese was going to have their moment one way or the other. They were a good band that made a good record that used a digital company along with like 100 other things, right? But what I keep thinking about is, wouldn't it be so much better if instead of paying a company to make 100 fake fan to comment on things and post, you actually just had a fan club, and in the way that Taylor Swift clearly has the relationship with her fans, right? Where you can just say, hey, I need you to go actually like all these posts and talk about my record on a release week, because that's what it takes. It's no longer about one profile or influencer with 1 million followers talking about something. You need hundreds of people with 100 followers. Your odds are way better of actually breaking through that way, especially if they're people who really believe in what you're trying to do, and that's work to coordinate. But bands could do it. It blows my mind that bands haven't organized themselves to do this, right? Like, so many bands I work with have more followers than the influencers that their managers are encouraging us to pay to talk about the song. And we're like, the band has more followers than this, The bands should be doing this to each other, and you get way further. Anyway, this is...
Rafael, você também, Rafael, você também trabalha, né, com o 360 do artista, cuidando de turnê, de imagem, de marca, né? Onde você vê o maior retorno no mercado de hoje, assim, porque as coisas vão, né, se transformando durante os anos? Onde você acha que vale mais a pena para um artista que está em desenvolvimento e investir, assim?
Bom, falando da minha experiência, né? Mercado alternativo, mais do indie rock e tudo mais. Acho que o show ainda é uma fonte de renda muito importante. Claro, e no mercado independente brasileiro, você tem que colher de todos os lados. Você precisa, que às vezes muitos artistas independentes que a gente começa a trabalhar ainda não tem muito bem estruturado, mas registro de composição, né? Ter tudo bonitinho lá com o ICAD, fonogramas, porque você precisa colher de todos os lados. Então, vai vir um pouquinho lá no digital, de plataformas de streaming, mas vem. Vai colher um pouquinho de ICAD do show que você fez aqui e ali, mas vem. Então, acho que você tem que estar muito conectado mesmo com todo o ecossistema da música. Mas eu citei, a gente vinha falando disso até agora há pouco, né? Mas sobre o digital, acho que ele ainda segue sendo um primeiro contato, né? A porta de entrada que hoje essa enxurrada de músicas inteligência artificial atrapalham, né? Atrapalham, assim, esse início de desenvolvimento de um artista. Mas, enfim, eu sinto que a nossa estratégia, pelo menos, costuma ser essa, né? Muito foco digital, lançamento, e aí, muito show. Show presencial, mexe, né? Desenvolver mexe, fazer vinil. A gente pensa muito em vinil dos artistas que a gente trabalha, CD, e é isso. Acho que o segredo é mais não olhar só para uma coisa. A gente tem que estar muito bem amarrado em todas as pontas e todas as frentes.
Mark, diante desse cenário de consolidação, o mercado independente ainda está crescendo muito, né? Você acha que essa ainda é uma tendência para os próximos anos ou a gente está pisando em ovos, assim, meio inseguros?
I definitely think that I'm already seeing it. This consolidation really changes the roadmap of the innovators of the industry, because people that are selling their companies are usually working differently after being acquired. They tend to have a different position in the company that acquired them, or they are leaving the company entirely. So that leads to unhappy customers or unhappy partners usually, because they sign up for one thing and then after the acquisition, usually they receive something worse, which makes them look for new partners to work with. And that creates opportunity for newer or emerging companies or emerging entrepreneurs to offer those services, led by founders and people that created the service or the company in the first place. So I think that the consolidation is definitely happening. It's obvious that majors are trying to buy market share, and they are doing it as fast as possible and with as much money as they can raise with VC funds and the money that they made with their catalogs. So I'm 100% sure that they will continue trying to do so. And there are a lot of companies that are not interested in selling. So I think that's something that's pretty obvious in the landscape right now in the music industry. In Latin America, particularly when we operate the most, we've had a lot of companies reach out to us because of this in the last few months, and I think that's it's inevitable that it will continue happening. And I don't know. For me as an independent, I'm not happy when a company that I admire sells to a major, but at the same time, everyone has their ideas of what they want next, and there are other companies that can serve those partners if they don't feel represented by Universal, Warner, or Sony.
E como nós, membros da UIN, podemos agir em relação a esse cenário, né? O que enquanto coletivo e associação, a gente ainda pode fazer para evitar que todos os independentes passem por essas dificuldades?
I think that ABMI is how many members does ABMI have?
100.
100. Okay, so 100 companies already have access to a network that if they were not members, probably they wouldn't know all these people that they can talk to or they can share information with. I think that's the main reason why we created the Paraguayan Trade Association, because where we are a much smaller country, we are only 7 million in population. I think that's less people than in Rio Road. So we felt that we all were struggling with the same things, but we were mostly competing or not cooperating enough. And I think just being able to reach out to a colleague and see each other as how we can collaborate instead of, I don't know, how to compete. It's a different way of thinking, and it's a really great advantage for independence, especially as Tony mentioned, when companies are just 5, 6 employees in a small company, and I think that's where the magic happens, and it's really exciting to meet everyone in doing the same thing in different parts of the world, and I think that's why I love Win, because you can travel. I don't know. We went to Bulgaria last year, and we were talking about the same things that we're talking here with people from all over the world, and they already, you know, can give you wine from their country, and they're immediately friends because they feel that they are suffering the same things as you, or they are facing the same challenges, or they are excited about the same thing as you. So I think that's the network effect that is the most important value that we can have as an independent organization.
Yeah, I would agree. And I mentioned it earlier, but Mark is talking about there's an organization called WIN. It's the Worldwide Independent Network. And I find a lot of people don't know that this exists, but there are independent trade associations in not every country in the world, but many, many, many countries.
70.
Yeah. And we meet like every month or two and trade information and talk about the challenges that we're facing. And it's representatives from India and South Korea, and it was, Chile and Paraguay and Brazil, and Canada. And it's fascinating to hear the perspectives from every country and how many shared concerns we have, especially as it concerns things like consolidation and AI, and also the challenges of our business. And also just largely making the case that, our community, when we work together, represents a significant amount of business, right? Because it's important, and I think it's the most important thing, is our cultural mission, and protecting, the kind of business that it needs to exist in order to support developing artists. But it also, we represent a huge portion of the global music industry's revenue. And we want to make sure that small businesses get this, and smaller artists get the same treatment as major label artists. And it really, this was my introduction to that community and these associations was when Apple invented iTunes. And many people don't remember this, but before it actually turned on, when they announced it, Apple said, there's going to be a major label rate and an independent artist rate that is less. And the Americans organized an independent trade association, which had already existed in Canada and in the UK, but America had not organized yet, because, America. And they were able to go and talk to them and make the case of like why that's a terrible thing, why it's a bad look for Apple as a company, and also just not a good way to do business. And they got them to change. And immediately our business, that, by now it's would have been millions of dollars impact on how much money we made as a company. So from the very beginning, it was real clear to me like how really important, organizing the independent community can be, the positive effects it can have for artists and all of us who are trying to work with artists.
Bom, já estamos chegando aí nos 15 minutos finais. Vou passar para vocês fazerem as considerações finais desse painel. e pedir para vocês deixarem assim dicas e uma mensagem de esperança para quem está começando a se aventurar nesse mercado, né? Como as pessoas podem ter acesso ao mercado de vocês, quais oportunidades vocês têm e só para responder rapidinho, se tem alguma banda brasileira que vocês gostam mais e que tem sido referência.
I like Turn Array, a really good band. And I think that my message is that, sorry, we've not been the most positive panel so far. But we always rant about this, sorry. And I think even though everything that we talked to about here is going on, at the same time, there are great opportunities in the market, and we've seen small companies grow thanks to a great catalog every day in our office, and I think that's pretty exciting. And we are still solving problems that are new every week, and this industry never stops to change. So at every change, there's a new opportunity, and there's room for innovation. So for that includes artists, entrepreneurs, labels, distributors. So you just have to stay alive in the market, and continue following the vision. I think that's my advice. And thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here, and it's been such an honor to be with you guys.
Thank you, Rafael.
A minha banda brasileira preferida vai ser minha enviesada, Tins. Posso pular essa, mas eu gostei do Tenonei. É a banda do Balaclava. Mas enfim, Balaclava Records, para quem quiser seguir. Eu sou o Rafael Farah. Queria agradecer o Rio2C pelo convite. Muito legal estar aqui, ter esse espaço para a gente poder falar. Acho que teria esse viés um pouco negativo também dos desafios do mercado independente, que acho que sempre é uma coisa que a gente vai falar de um monstro, né, que está ali, mas que a gente enfrenta e não desiste e conseguir fazer isso até o final. Mas tem muita coisa positiva, eu acho, né? Acho que o mercado brasileiro está num momento de muita coisa boa surgindo, muita artista muito legal. A gente até tem um trabalho muito difícil, né? Como curadoria e tudo mais. A gente recebe muita coisa boa todo dia e tem que falar não para uma galera que eu queria lançar, queria trabalhar muito. Então, a gente está num momento de produção cultural excelente. Acho que as estruturas... Eu comecei no mercado tocando quando eu tinha 13, 14, até os 20 e poucos ali. E eu lembro como era, né? Eu não sou tão velho assim, mas já estou nos meus 40. Mas era bem diferente, assim, a estrutura do mercado, para quem estava começando, os espaços, as casas de show. Era difícil você conseguir um lugar legal para tocar com um backline mínimo, sabe? Com uma estrutura ok para você fazer isso, mesmo nas grandes capitais, né? Circular era mais difícil. Então, hoje em dia, acho que existe uma rede do mercado independente para quem quer começar a tecnologia para gravar, acho que é muito mais fácil, né? Você precisa gastar tanto dinheiro quanto 20, 30 anos atrás para gravar uma demo, para poder começar a existir. Então, acho que tem muito caminho, tem muita oportunidade. E o segredo é esse também, é o mesmo do mar, que é siga fazendo, sempre não desista. Acho que esse é o grande segredo da música, né? Muitos casos, muitos artistas, muitas empresas que foram dar certo ali na sua quarta, quinta disco ou no seu 15º ano. Então, acho que é um trabalho de muita insistência. É isso.
Tony?
I agree. I think the entry point to anybody could be a record company. Anybody could be a publishing company. It doesn't take thousands of dollars or a community of people can achieve so much more than was possible 20 years ago. And I think that is really exciting. And I also, I just am going to sneak this in because I feel like it doesn't get talked about enough is how important every artistic and media discipline is in the music industry. You know, we talk so much about music, obviously, but good illustrators, good graphic designers, good videographers, you know, good promoters, you know, there's photographers, like all of for Sub Pop, I mean, that was huge. Everybody, you know, the grunge movement, you know, would not have been the grunge movement without those exciting black and white photos of kids moshing and crowd surfing and the bands, you know, sweaty and shirtless, you know, stage diving. That was as much a part of selling that scene as the songs themselves. And less talked about there were a lot of alternative comic artists, like the illustrators were doing a lot of stuff for Sub Pop. There was a whole community up in the Northwest of America, these comic books like 8 Ball and Hated that were all published out of Seattle. And that's that was all in there. And then really funny, gifted writers who were writing, they were making these narratives up about these bands and having fun with it. And that was a community of people who all got together in their love of these bands. And it was dozens of people. It wasn't thousands of people. And then they sold that image and that story and those songs to the whole world, you know? And in their remoteness, their exotic, not being New York or LA or London, was an advantage. And I think that is really, to me, that's the most inspiring thing. And I always want to encourage, I think, and either there's an idea of, oh, I want to work with this person, this celebrated producer, you know, who did all of these huge records. They're like, there's someone in your neighborhood, right, who is already a good producer, right, and just needs more repetition and will become that person. And again, like supporting your community or working together towards a shared vision of what you think your scene should be like it's the coolest thing, right? And so incredible when it happens. And yeah, so I just want to encourage that, and then also want to encourage everyone to listen to everything that Balaclava is putting out, because I think they're on the cutting edge, I think, of the Brazilian music.
Muito obrigado pelo tempo e pelas trocas. Tenho certeza que foi muito inspirador para várias pessoas aqui. Bom, a ABMI continua sendo o suporte para iniciativas, tanto para artistas independentes quanto para selos que estão em desenvolvimento, para se conectarem com outras pessoas, com outros mercados, com territórios. E aqui na Rio2C é um mercado, é uma oportunidade incrível para vocês fazerem esse intercâmbio com outros setores, né? Temos pessoas incríveis do audiovisual que estão produzindo séries, vídeos on demand, documentários, filmes para cinema. E aqui é a melhor oportunidade que vocês podem ter de conseguir, né, um bom contrato de sincronização. Mesmo com empresas de games que estão trabalhando, podem dar uma rodada aí pelo pavilhão, que vocês vão encontrar muitas pessoas buscando músicas de diversos gêneros, e nisso o Brasil ele tem uma relevância muito grande, porque a gente, ao mesmo tempo que é um país muito extenso e território, também temos muita riqueza, né, de culturas, de gêneros específicos em cada território. Então, agradeço vocês por estar aqui mais uma vez com a gente, e pela Rio2C, pelo espaço. E quem não conhece ainda o trabalho da BMI, visita nosso site, lá tem bastante informações, podem ser úteis. Obrigada, boa tarde.
Thank you.